From its award-winning author event series to its extensive collections of everything from ebooks to rare books, the Free Library is dedicated to advancing literacy, guiding learning, and inspiring curiosity through thought-provoking programs and life-changing resources. Many of the library's most beloved programs and services are made possible only with the help of private support. Please make a gift of whatever amount you are able to help the Free Library transform lives. You can do so online at freelibrary.org/support. It is my great pleasure tonight to introduce Isabel Allende. If you want to learn more about tonight's author and you decide to visit her website, the first thing you have to do before you can access any content is make a decision, English or Espanol. To me, this reflects not only how internationally popular, but how necessary this multilingual author is to readers the world over. She expresses herself in language that speaks to us in multiple tongues, whether she is weaving magical fiction that transcends reality to become timeless, as in her brilliant first novel, The House of the Spirits, or when she is taking us on a painful journey of love and loss, as she did in her memoir, Paula. In over 20 books, she has created a following of readers who eagerly await her next storytelling venture, and today we have it. In her new book, The Japanese Lover, Ms. Allende again tells of lifetimes that encompass the personal challenges of finding and keeping love, and of creating family, and also political and sociocultural issues and traumas such as the horrors of the Holocaust and the internment of the American Japanese population during World War II. Tonight, Ms. Allende will be in conversation with Tamala Edwards, anchor of the 6 ABC Action News Morning Edition. Please join me in welcoming Isabel Allende and Tamala Edwards to the Free Library.
All right, Isabel, we're here to talk about your latest book, The Japanese Lover, and I was asking you a little bit backstage about inspiration and how your stories come to you. How did these characters, this story, begin with you?
Sometimes the story is just a gift from heaven, and that is what happened with this book. I was walking with a friend in the streets of New York talking about our mothers. My mother is 95, and my stepfather is 100, by the way. He should have died a long time ago. And that's what my mother says. Well, in any case, we were talking about our mothers, and my friend said that her mother, who was living in a retirement home, had a friend who was a Japanese gardener for 40 years. So I said, they were lovers. And she said, no, why would you think that of my mother? And I said, well, because if I had had a male friend for 40 years, I would have slept with him. And that was the end of the conversation. But somehow the idea stayed with me. Why? People give me their stories all the time. Why did this stay with me? I think it's because the woman was 80 years old. And I am at a stage in my life in which I confront old age. My parents are really old. I'm surrounded by people my age who are falling apart. And so, of course, that was a theme. But also the idea of love at that age. And then I started sort of researching and looking around and found that there is a lot of older people who have passionate love affairs. Mm-hmm. And they fall in love like teenagers. And I'm hoping that for myself at this point. Why do you clap?
One of the main characters of the book is Alma, who's a very independent, different...
She's a bitch.
She's not like anybody else you would ever meet. And up until the end, walks her own path. And she has two loves of her life. The man she marries, her cousin, whom she discovers things about, and the gardener, Ichi, who she has a lifelong passion for. But what I found interesting is one of those men, she knows nothing about. She doesn't figure out his secret till the end. And the other man, you would think they're so different. Why would they be together?
Maybe because they're so different. They meet as children. She has come from Poland to live with her aunt and her uncle in San Francisco. She comes from a Jewish family, and her family will be exterminated in Europe. And so she stays in San Francisco with this family that adopts her. And she's wealthy. She has never had to work for a living. She's a very privileged person. And she lives in a mansion. And the gardener has a son. And the gardener is Japanese, first generation. And he has a son that comes to work with him who is exactly the same age as Alma. So they're 8 years old. They meet. And they fall in love as children, sometimes too. And, of course, they are separated first by the war, because when the war started and Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, there was a wave of panic in the United States, and the idea was that maybe Japan was going to invade by the Pacific. So all the Pacific coast was declared militarized zone, and the Japanese immigrants and their children, who were American citizens, were arrested and put in internment camps. Today they call them concentration camps because that's what they were. Of course, not comparable to what happened in Europe, but these people for 4 years and a half had to live in these camps, and they lost everything they had. So the Fukuda family, the family of the little boy, ends up in this camp, and they are separated at that age. And then in life they are separated many times, but their love endures to the very end.
Do you find people are surprised about the internment camps? You would think this part of American history people would know, but I often feel as though it's a gap for people, that they haven't heard a lot about it, that they don't know a lot about it.
Well, what happened was that the people who had been in the camps, the first generation Japanese immigrants, felt so dishonored, so offended by what had happened, so disrespected. And so the whole situation for them was so shameful that they never talked about it. And their children, many of them who had grown up in the camps, were sort of not allowed to talk about it. It was a taboo subject. And it was the third generation, the grandchildren, that have brought out the story, and now it's well known. Well, not well known yet, but it's out there.
One of the things I found interesting about Alma is because she's so strong-willed, there's no best friend, there's no other woman influencing her. She does what she wants to do, except with this great love. It's the one place where she shows shame, where she gives in to prejudice, where she gives in, and you think, how could this woman be so individualistic and strong, except in the one place it mattered?
Because, first of all, when it mattered, she was very young. Then it was the 50s, the 60s, when in the United States, interracial unions were illegal. She couldn't legally marry him. But also, and this is, I think, more important in her case, there were the obstacles of race, of wealth, of social class, culture. This was a wealthy woman living in a mansion. Would she go to live in a shack with a gardener? I don't think so. And I think if they had married, it would have been a disaster. The fact that they didn't marry and they were lovers made this love so unique. I mean, people ask me all the time, do you think that love can endure the passage of time? And I think it does, if it's not the husband.
We're laughing, but I think you mean that seriously.
Oh, I do, absolutely. I have had 2 husbands. And I will probably have a third one. But if I had, well, I have moved a lot in my life. So I've started from scratch in different countries several times. So it would be impossible for me to have one lover all my life. But if I had, well, probably it would have lasted a lifetime. Because with a lover, you share the best of you. You get together just for pleasure and for laughter and for sharing the best. With a husband, you have to sleep every night, the laundry, the bills, the kids, snoring. Oh my God, it's difficult. It's difficult.
Is that the wisdom of age? I have to tell you, I have a couple of friends who 50, 60, 70, that is exactly how they feel. And they say they wouldn't have felt that way in their 20s, 30s. They are very glad to have their lives, their children, their pursuits, and that person who does not bother them for any other reason than Sunday afternoon in the park, Saturday afternoon, evening by the fire.
How do they do
like
it? They're
those
lucky.
affairs. What?
Yeah. How lucky of them that they can do that. I think that in general, men age badly. And by the time, for example, people my age, I'm in my 70s, I don't know, the men that would be appropriate to my age, they have prostate cancer and bad teeth. So, I don't know.
Maybe it's all about younger men.
It's about younger men. Yeah, that's the thing. I'm going to go in the internet as a cougar. Yeah.
But in the book, you write about both of those things, that on one hand, people fear getting old, but the actual people who are old in the book, Alma, Lenny, Ichi when he gets old, in his last letter to her, he says to her, this is nothing to be afraid of. It's like I'm 17 again. And I thought that was an interesting theme to hit, that it's only as fearful as you make it.
Well, in different stages in our lives, we don't question our age. I mean, we are 40, and we are 40, that's it. Then we are 50, and then we are 60, but suddenly you become invisible, and this is a culture, I'm not talking about all the Western world, that focuses on people being productive, young, if possible, successful, and beautiful. And so when you become older, you're like a burden instead of being part of the society. The other thing is that we put everybody in one bag, 65 and older, as if being 65 was the same as being 95. And it's not. It depends on how dependent you are. I see my mother. My mother has the brain of a 30-year-old person. She uses all the technology. She emails me every day, uses Skype, Facebook, everything, at 95. But her body, the body is the body of a 95-year-old woman who is very frail. So she's totally dependent. And I cannot compare her life to my life because I still can drive at night. Yeah.
Another issue one has to deal with as you age is regret and making peace. Alma has to make her peace with the choices she made. Some people regret the choices they make. What are your thoughts on that in life? The place of regret as we get older.
We all have something to regret, and it's unavoidable. But I think that as we get older, we remember very well the past, and we select the memories. In a way, we create our own legend. We decide who we have been. And I think that the other thing that is important about aging is to prepare for that, like for everything else in life. If you have been a jerk all your life, why would you be wise because you age? You will be a greater jerk. Exactly. So just as you prepare for anything else, you have to prepare physically, spiritually, and socially. You have to have a community. You have to be engaged in the world, have a purpose. Otherwise, it's very lonely.
There are younger characters in the book, Seth, the grandson, and Irina, a woman that Alma comes to be very close to and her grandson comes to love. But Irina has a terrible past that she has a hard time dealing with. Throughout your career, you've lived all around the world. You've seen people have to make their peace with really hard past lives. Are people able to do it? Are you able to break free and move on? Or are we always a little bit trapped in that past?
I know many people who move on. I have a family foundation that I created after my daughter's death to honor her. And the mission of my foundation is empowerment of women and girls. And the year that I was writing the book, my foundation gives several grants during the whole year, but once a year we give a larger grant that is called the Espíritu Award. And we choose a theme that is prevalent that year, in that moment. And in that moment, everybody was talking about human trafficking. So that my foundation focused that year on human trafficking. And we saw many cases like Irina. And we see people that have gone through unbelievable horrors. And they not only survive, they get back on their feet and they become leaders in their communities, especially women. So it is I don't have to invent those characters. They really are all around us.
In the book, part of how love stays alive is the written word. Alma keeps Ichi alive even when he's not. And as I was reading it, I was thinking, could we do this today? Everything is a Snapchat, a text message.
That's true.
A Twitter, a tweet, I should say. How would you keep a level? Do we lose this now?
You know, my mother and I have written to each other every single day for decades. And before my mother would send me handwritten letters, and so would I. Then we went to the faxes, and that was bad because faxes would fade in time with light. And now we use the email. She emails me every day, and I print her letter. And I have a closet full of plastic boxes by year with my mother's letters. If you ask me what happened July 17, 1987, I pull out the box and I can tell you. My life is about these letters. Everything is there. What she writes to me and what I write to her. I feel that my life is not lost. And if I don't write to my mother one day, that day I will forget. It's lost. So it pains me when I see that the art and beauty of letters is lost, it's gone.
What do you do with your grandchildren to try to be as vivid for them
My grandchildren, if they send me a Facebook message, that would be so great. So great, they don't even call me. I mean, I hope that for Thanksgiving I will see them, maybe.
In the book, you know, we always hear life isn't what happens to you, it's what you do next. And there's some characters who let what happens to them make them bitter. Ishi's father can never get over it, it kills him. And other people figure out how to get on. What is the trick to that in life, and why some people can do that and other people can't?
You know, I don't know. It seems to be something of temperament. There's a beautiful book, I can't remember the name, about survivors in concentration camps. Who are the people who survive? The ones who have that gene that allows them to see the positive in whatever situation and overcome every single time. And other people are just destroyed. So I don't know what is the secret. But I think it has to do with temperament.
In the book, people love people, regardless of where they're from, their religion, their race, various relationships. And I was struck reading the book at this moment in this country, when it often seems as though we're so separated, whether it's presidential politics or watching what's going on campuses, people here, people there. It doesn't feel as though we're able to live like the characters in this book, where you just love who you love.
You know, when we look at society at large, that's the feeling. But if you talk to individuals, to the people here, each one of you, we don't feel that way. I mean, I think that we all feel that we are connected in a world that is more and more connected. Today we know about we know what's happening to anybody everywhere, immediately. And that's a form of connection that I didn't have when I was growing up. I feel that we live in a more integrated world, and all these differences are just very superficial.
You said that you collect stories from friends and from others. Do you find the internet is now a way that you collect stories? Does it make its way into your writing?
I rather talk to people. People have stories, interesting stories. I also use the internet for research and for other things. But people have stories, and those are the stories I want to hear, the real people. And it's really easy to get people's stories because everybody's willing to talk about their lives. And I find that charming.
With Alma, when you write about her, she's so vivid and passionate and sexual up to the end. And often in our literature and in our society, we don't let older women be that way.
No, men can, but not women. You know, my neighbor is 87 years old, and she's stunning, tall, with a mane of gray hair, and she has long earrings and silk pants. And she has a lover who is 14 years younger, who visits from Thursday to Sunday. So on Thursday, I am with binoculars trying to find out. what's going on in the next house. And she has a passionate sex life, I can assure you.
Why do you think that we're so invested in shutting down that aspect of women? That we don't talk about it, it's
Because
not put out there?
women are valuable when they are in their reproductive years. And we live in a patriarchy where men have all the advantages and women are used and they are objects. That's changing, fortunately, but not fast enough. And now we are at a time when there is a large and growing population of older people, mostly women because they live longer and they are in better shape than men usually. So we have these women that are also empowered by education, sometimes by activism, and by the fact that they keep themselves healthy and fit. And we have to tap into that force to eliminate the patriarchy to begin with, and then we'll start talking. So I think that's going to change. It's already changing.
In the book, there's a scene where there's a character who, not even a character, a woman has gotten a package from Thailand. She's ready to move on in life.
To move into death, you mean?
Move into death, I should say. And the nursing home has a big debate over whether or not she'll be allowed to do it. And the director says absolutely not. But it's clear that everybody else in the room thinks that she should be able to do this. And I was like, that's interesting. You never hear this conversation. But it must go on. But
you do, actually. There are now 5 states in the United States where assisted dying is legal. If you are a terminal patient or and you have the 3 doctors, I think, have to sign, and you have expressed your will, you will be assisted to die with dignity and no pain. This has already been legal in several countries in Europe, like the Netherlands and Switzerland, for more than 20 years. And it's beginning to be in the public conversation now in the United States, and I do hope that when my time comes, it will be legal everywhere. It's an option that people should have. And today, the people who have the option are those who can pay for it, like everything else.
Backstage, your daughter-in-law said, in Europe, a lot of people brought that up, but not as much here.
No, here, no one has asked that question. You're the first one. And in Europe, people have asked it, especially in Spain.
What did that tell you? That we don't even, that's what I mean by it's not a part of the obvious conversation.
Because we are talking about Trump right now. But
you
wait.
open the door, what do you think of him?
What do you think I think? Yeah.
I'm not giving up. You've made a career of writing about people who are willing to be the immigrant, to be the searcher, the wanderer, the person who comes into this country. And there is a strain in politics right now that says that person's not welcome.
Well, that happens in every country. And in every society, you have a sector of the population that thinks like that. And you can tap into that. They're usually the less educated people who have not many economic resources, and they feel left out and threatened by the new people who come in. But this is a country that has been made with waves of immigrants from all over the world. None of you here, except if you are Native Americans, can say that you were originally from this land. You were not. So, and every wave of immigrants have confronted an unwelcome reception. The Jews, the Arabs, the Irish, the Italians, the Scandinavians, all of them. And then they integrate. And the worst case scenario were the Chinese, because when people look different, then it's even harder to accept them. But all these people have contributed to the greatness of this country. So if you think that you can build a wall and deport 11 million people, think twice.
I wondered the role religion subtly plays in the book. Ichi comes to be the only child of his father's children who actually follows the religion, and it gives him peace. And Alma, her Jewishness, it's there, but she doesn't really care about it. Was there a reason you made Alma Jewish, and what role did you want religion to play in the book?
I didn't make Alma Jewish; she just came Jewish, and I couldn't change her. The same with Ichimei.
Yeah.
He came Japanese, and it would have been easier for me if he was Mexican, because of course a Mexican gardener would make sense, and I would understand his culture much better. I wouldn't have to research so much. But characters just come the way they are, and you cannot change them. So Alma's Jewishness, she comes from a very secular and educated and wealthy Jewish family in San Francisco, where being Jewish is just vaguely part of the background and the tradition, but it's not very present in her life. On the other hand, the Fukuda family, they live with their traditions, and the father belongs to a small community of Oomoto, a form of religion from Japan, and for him it's very important. It defines him in a way, and I think it's part of creating the character is giving him that trait. Now, is religion important? I think it is in that particular case. And I just read a survey. They say that people who have religion are happier, and people who are married are happier. I wonder. I was raised Catholic, and I'm telling you, it's not easy.
Maybe they're just more likely to answer our survey.
Yeah. Check the survey. Yeah.
The love story between Seth and Irina, he's very giving, very understanding. She's come through this trafficking, and he's like, we'll make it work. But there's a subtle little line in the book where you talk about his wife sending him for therapy. And so I wondered, was Irina the wife, and why is he in therapy?
Who is in therapy?
In the book, there's a line that says, Seth, in talking to a therapist, that his wife made him go. And I wondered, who was the wife?
Seth was not married.
But it seemed to be in the future this would happen to him.
There must be a mistake in the translation. I don't remember. I really don't remember. The translation is fine. It's a wonderful translation into English, and I did check line by line, so I think you might read, or you read another book. But the things with translation, it's really great. My books are translated to 35 languages, and of course I can't even read the alphabet of many of them. But I just came back from Europe. I was in the Netherlands, and this journalist interviewed me, and he said, I just love your sense of humor, your sense of irony. That book, Ripper, how did you come up with the idea of an arthritic rabbit? And I said, a rabbit? I don't think I have a rabbit, let alone with arthritis. And he said, yes, he's treated by the healer in the book. And he said, no, it was a poodle. And so the whole thing was that a mistake in the translation, and the Dutch are reading a much better book because of course a rabbit is much better than a poodle. Of course, I don't know why I didn't come up with that.
I will go back and check my translation. Yeah. I don't want to give away
No, please don't.
anything. There are two characters Irina and Lenny, who you would think would be at odds. But instead,
Irina and who?
Not Irina, Alma and Lenny, that you would think would be at odds when they come together.
Love each
but
other.
Instead, they have this incredible bond. It was interesting to me that the strength of that bond immediately.
Yeah, that's part of the story that I can't give away right now because I want you to read the book, of course. And this is a book about secrets, and everybody has a secret. And the whole book is about revealing slowly the secrets. And Lenny is a character that comes to the retirement home late in the book. And he goes there to die. Nobody knows this, but he has a terminal illness. And he will ask Alma to help him die. And then they become immediately bonded because they have a past together. And the past, you would expect them to be rivals and enemies, but they are not, because they have both loved the same person, and they have both been present in that person's death. And so they are bonded for life because of that experience.
Hello, my name's Carrie, and I've been reading your books since like 2000. I was introduced in a Latin American studies class, and we read Daughter of Fortune, which is one of my favorites. I just want to know which one is your favorite to write.
Which one of my books is my favorite? Oof, I have favorite characters that keep coming back. But it's very hard to say. I don't remember my books very well. I can't remember the one I just wrote. So I really don't know. But the book that brings me more letters from my readers is Paula. And I get letters all the time. That book was written more than 20 years ago, and still people connect to it. It's a book about the death of my daughter, and it's about family and losses. And I think that everyone, at some point in their lives, have a loss of some kind. Yeah.
No pensé que iba a estar así de nervioso ahora.
Puedes preguntar en castellano, yo
Sí,
te lo
voy a-
traduzco.
yo
I
lo-
will translate. Yeah. ¿Cuál es la pregunta?
Ahora voy. Cuando conocí a mi esposa, hace 11 años atrás, ella me contó que ella es de acá, está aquí y acá están mis dos hijos. Y me contaba que su escritora favorita de todo el tiempo
Espero que era yo.
eras tú.
Yeah.
Y decía, mi escritora favorita de todo el mundo es Isabel Allende y es de Chile. Mi poeta favorito es Pablo Neruda y es de Chile. Y me conoció a mí, que yo también soy de Chile.
O sea,
y nos casamos.
se casó contigo porque eras chileno.
Yo creo.
Yeah.
Así que tengo muchas cosas que agradecer, porque la primera introducción a mi país fuiste tú.
Bueno, déjame
No.
traducir porque ya me estoy perdiendo. He's married to an American and they are his children, and she loved my books, and she probably married him because he was Chilean.
Yeah, that's basically it. But you have one experience with Pablo Neruda that I don't know if everybody
You want me to
knows
tell that
here.
story?
So that will be very nice, because the same way that you introduced my country and also myself to my wife, giving a good impression.
Well, we don't know if it was good or not. Okay, you want me to tell the story about Pablo Neruda?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the advice he gave you.
Many years ago, in 1973, right before the military coup in Chile, it was winter in Chile, I was invited by Pablo Neruda, the great Chilean poet, to his house. He was a Nobel Prize, and I was a journalist, and I thought that he wanted me to interview him. And he was living in the beach, like 2 hours away from Santiago. It was raining. So I got there, and he offered me lunch. We had a wonderful fish with white wine. And then it was getting late and dark, and I said, Don Paulo, I would like to do the interview now because I have to drive back. And he said, what interview? And I said, well, I came to interview you. He said, are you kidding? You are the worst journalist in this country. You always put yourself in the middle of every story. You can never be objective. And I'm sure that if you don't have a story, you make it up. Why don't you switch to literature, where all these defects are virtues? That was in 1973. I didn't pay any attention. I wrote my book in many, many years later in 1981. And the poet died 11 days after the military coup.
Would you consider yourself Peruvian or Chilean?
I am Chilean. I was born in Peru because my parents were diplomats in Peru. But the children of diplomats, when they are registered in the consulate, they have the nationality of the parents. So I had the Chilean nationality from the very beginning. My advice for writers, I don't have much advice, but the best advice, I heard it from Elizabeth Gilbert. They asked her this question, we were in an event, and she answered, write, but don't expect your writing to give you fame or money. Write because you love the process. And the truth is that very few people get published. But that doesn't mean that we can't write. We can write. And what I would add to that is that if you are an aspiring writer, this is like sports. In sports, you train and train and train to play the game. Here you have to write to have one good page and keep writing. No one will write the great American novel in one sitting. That doesn't happen.
Ms. Allende, when you do write, your structure, do you write to a specific ending, or do you allow the book to develop to an ending based on the story as it moves along?
As I said before, the stories just happen and the characters walk in. I start all my books on January 8th. And on January 7th, usually I don't have anything except a vague idea of what the book might be, and I have done a little research about the place where the story happens and the time. That's it. And then I just show up every day in front of my computer for hours and hours without a script and without any real idea of what I want. It's not a very efficient way of writing because, of course, I find myself in dead ends all the time and I have to change directions. But I don't know where the story is going, what characters I will need and will come, or I will have to look for them, or let alone how the story will end. Sometimes, and it has happened with a couple of books, I think I have an ending, and I come to write the ending, and I realize that the book ended the day before. And if I add anything, I will take away from the story. So I'm very open to the organic process of creating the story. But then I'm really rigorous, correcting and editing after the story is down.
Bueno, primero de todo, yo hablo inglés, pero me quiero primero darle las gracias que está aquí con nosotros y quiero decir que es un honor estar entre ustedes. Usted ha sido pues una autora que ha crecido conmigo desde que me leí La Ciudad de las Bestias, hasta que mi mamá me empujó a que me leyera La Casa de los Espíritus hasta este verano, pues que me leí Paula y fue una maravilla de libro. Aquí le estaba contando a mi mejor amiga y mi compañera de cuarto las últimas...
¿Tú hablas inglés?
Sí,
¿Sigue en inglés?
Bueno, nada. Well, first off, as I was saying...
Ya, pero sigue la pregunta.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you so much for being here. And my question is, so I read Paula this summer, and I read about, it was a beautiful book, and it was autobiographical, and you read about your experiences as a journalist and turning into a writer. But I'd like to hear that experience from you. Where did that switch come from within you? Like, can you explain to us from, being a journalist in Chile and being in communications to ending up, writing fiction and nonfiction too?
Well, I didn't have many choices. I was a journalist in Chile, and when we had the military coup, I had to get out of my country, and I became a political refugee in Venezuela. And I couldn't find a job as a journalist. Nothing of what I had done before was of any value in this new place where I had to learn the clues of the society from scratch. So I couldn't work as a journalist, but all these stories were sort of accumulating inside. And many years later, on January 8th, 1981, I started a letter for my dying grandfather, who was in Chile, and I couldn't go back to say goodbye to him. And that letter evolved into The House of the Spirits. I didn't decide to be a writer at all, but I think that a lot of stuff that I learned as a journalist, I have been able to use in literature. How to research, how to conduct an interview, how to use language efficiently, how to trap your reader by the neck and don't let the reader go. Those, and also, I give myself deadlines. Just as I have a day to begin, I have daily deadlines for my work, which is what we do as journalists. You always work in a hurry and under stressful circumstances. You know that very well. But writers don't have that, so they procrastinate a lot. They drink a lot. They sleep a lot. I don't. I work like crazy.
Isabel, one thing I admire about the books that you write, because I have read almost all of them, is that in all of your books, the female characters are always the empowered, the leaders, and they take the leading role, and it's always that very strong character that drives the story. Right now, here we are going through a phase with the feminism that lean in, trying to get women to get out of their comfort zone and move into the leadership roles, which I'm hoping to be one of them and trying to get there too. Being a leader yourself and a spoken person about females kind of outside their roles, what kind of advice will you have for us?
Well, first of all, I think that women have the right to stay at home and raise a family. That's a job like any other job. And we live in a world that being productive economically is the only thing that we evaluate. But there are many other things that we have to evaluate also. I think that for women, life today is very difficult because they have two jobs. Still, we live in a world in which men don't participate in equal terms in raising kids and in the domestic chores. So it's very difficult for women. But I have seen a huge change in my lifetime. I was born in the 40s. You cannot imagine what the 40s was or the 50s in Chile, in a patriarchal, Catholic, conservative society. I mean, there was not a chance for a woman. And in my lifetime, I have seen what the women's movement has done for women. And the struggle continues. When I see young women, the age of my granddaughters, that don't want to be called feminists because it's not sexy, I get very angry. Well, call yourself whatever you want. But the struggle is still there, and you still have to work for your sisters all over the world. Because I work with a foundation with women in different countries, I know that what we have here is not what most women have in the rest of the world. Women are still sold into premature marriage, forced labor, prostitution. They are forced to have the children that they don't want or they can't support. They are beaten, exploited, abused in all forms with total impunity. It's part of the culture. And it takes very little. It takes an economic crisis, it takes fanaticism, and women lose everything, are the first victims in any crisis. Look at the Taliban. In 24 hours, women who were lawyers, doctors, had to cover themselves with a burqa and stay at home. So those things happen in the world all the time. And I think that we as women, very privileged women, we should work for our sisters. And
Buenas noches. I'm gonna. I wanted to congratulate for your novels. You inspire women, and if I can tell you my question in Spanish, please.
Yes, dale nomás.
Quisiera saber cuál fue el desafío más grande que usted tuvo que afrontar empezando la fundación. He leído un poco en la página que tiene de internet y es muy interesante.
She's asking about the greatest challenge that I have had. ¿Estás hablando en la vida personal o en la literatura? In my personal life, the greatest challenge that I ever confronted was the illness and death of my daughter. That happened when I turned 50, and I divide my life before and after, because I'm not the same person I was before. And surviving that was the biggest challenge, to the point that today, except for very few things, I can't think of anything that would break me. If that didn't break me, very few things will.
Hola, buenas noches, Isabel. I just want to say, first of all, thank you for helping me escape reality. A lot of times, travel through times and go to places that I've never been. I also want to say thank you because my first book that I read from you was La Ciudad de las Bestias, and your main character talks about his mother having cancer, and when I started reading that book, my father was diagnosed with cancer and passed away.
Oh.
And it was like really shocking, but at the same time, like it makes me, I related to him, and it made me fought for like me to get better in my family. And besides all that, my question is, do you ever, when you're doing research, do you travel to those countries and those places that you talk about? And thank you for everything.
Well, thank you for reading my books with an open heart. Thanks a lot. Usually I know the place either because I've been there or I go. And there are some places that I don't need to research. Anything that has to do with Chile, it's in my DNA. I don't have to research it. But most of my books are placed in places that I have been. If I'm a citizen of any country at all, I am an American citizen now. I know. No, legally. And in my heart, I feel that I have one foot in Chile and one foot here, and I don't have to choose. I am completely bicultural, and I have brought with me all my baggage and my language and my memories and my sense of family and all that. And I have added to my life everything that this country offers. So when I have to talk to people who are recent immigrants and they feel so lost and confused, as I felt at the beginning, I tell them, you don't have to give anything up. Just keep adding, be very greedy. You can have everything. And I think that has worked really well for me. I don't feel that I quite belong anywhere because I've been a foreigner all my life. And I'm a foreigner in Chile too. I haven't lived there for 40 years. And when I go back, I realize that the first week is wonderful. And the second week, everybody wants me out, including my mother. So I really I don't quite belong.
Hola, señorita Allende, mi nombre es Andreina. Yo soy una estudiante internacional, vengo de Venezuela. Quiero decirle que dos de mis profesoras de español, que son mi inspiración más grande, son la señorita Mónica Lucas y Virginia Baceta. Now I'll continue in my question in English. So I know that a lot of authors say that they feel that their soul is a writer. So I was wondering if you feel that you are a woman who's a writer, or a writer that happens to be a woman, or alternately, if you are a Latin American writer or a writer who happens to be Latin American.
That's a very good question. And I don't know how to answer it because I really don't, because of course I'm a woman writer. Why do I say this? I think that language doesn't have gender, and literature should not have gender. But the fact that I'm a woman writer it's a liability in the world in which we live. I have had to do double the effort of any man to get half the respect and recognition. And that happens in almost any field. But it happens very much so in literature, especially in Latin American literature. And now, where do I belong? Am I a Latin American writer or not? I think that more and more I have become very international, because not all my stories are Latin American anymore. I have written at least 3 books that are placed in the United States. So I don't know how to answer that question. But I feel that in a way, in a strange way, at my age now, finally, all things have come together, and I know who I am, and I didn't before. And I feel more self-confident about this person. To me, gender, nationality, race, all that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is connections and the love that I feel for some people and the love of storytelling.
On January 8th, do you begin writing in English or Spanish? Would you say something about whichever it is and explain to us why and what it
I
means?
can only write fiction in Spanish. And maybe I could write a speech in English with a lot of dictionaries. But fiction, as I said before, it sort of unfolds slowly. And all those organic, personal processes in my life happen in Spanish. Dreaming, counting, cooking, making love. I couldn't possibly be panting in English. So if I get a lover, he will have to at least get a dictionary. maybe have the dictionary on the night table.
Doña Isabel, enhorabuena. My question is, I understand that you used to work translating romance novels, and that that didn't last too long.
No, that didn't work very well.
Can you tell us why?
Well, because I was translating these romance novels in which the female protagonist looks mentally deficient. They all have big breasts and green eyes, and they seem so silly. So I would introduce a few changes not many in the dialogue and sometimes in the ending. The stories were all alike. Well, this was a long time ago. The stories were usually this virgin. They were all virgins. As I said, with big breasts and green eyes, who meets this CEO who is very rich, but he's disenchanted of love, and he's very cold. And they meet in some exotic place, like a Polynesian island, where they have landed, who knows why. And then there's the steaming romance, but they never go to bed until the very end of the book. That creates a lot of suspense. So I would change a few things. And the publisher did not appreciate it at all, and I was fired.
My guess is your version was better.
Of course it was better, way better.
Hello, as a fellow Chilean and fellow feminist, I'm always very curious as to whether you have made a connection with Michelle Bachelet, who is the first female president in Chile and also has had similar experiences during the Pinochet era.
I cannot say that I'm a friend of Michelle Bachelet, the president, but I see her every time I go to Chile. And we were acquaintances long before she became president. This is a very interesting woman. Michelle Bachelet is a single mother, socialist, atheist, and she became president in the most socially conservative country in the world, and Catholic. And she's done a lot for women's rights in Chile. It's our first woman president. I like her a lot. I think that she's done a really very good government, the first one, and she has a lot of opposition in this second period, and history will judge her well, I think.
Can we please give Isabel Allende
thank you.
a round of applause?